go, guys. We're going to get started for tonight. How's everybody's week going so far? Huh? Do what? Bad. So it looks to me like everybody probably woke up this week.
No.
Everybody, and I'm going to guess everybody's had something to eat this week. Just looking at the case. Only yesterday. And it looks like most of y'all are feeling pretty good. So I'd say it's a pretty good week. Let's think about our blessings rather than the bad stuff.
She's feeling anxious too.
Well, that's Corey. She always knows that. But anyways, good to have y'all. We're going to jump right on in and try to get this going tonight. So I'm going to start with a question, and this is for everybody. What, if any, school subjects would you say the Bible qualifies for as a textbook? Anybody, Faith? You say history? Okay.
I'm going to say history.
He's going to say history. Anybody else got anything? What, you'll have to help me with that.
What about science?
English language arts?
What about science? Morning, what is science?
Hey, let's try to do this with a hand so I can understand what y'all saying.
Oh, science.
Science, okay. All right. Anybody else got anything? Now let me ask you this. Do you think it could be a textbook in this? Now think about that. This is a textbook.
When he said history or world history, it could be used as one of.
Okay. All right. It's just what I'm just asking y'all. What y'all think?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad you said that, Carson, because that's a perfect segue into what we're doing tonight real quick. I titled this Textbook Bible. I'm going to let y'all know that this is a little controversial, and I'll explain why. In 1861, which was just a couple years before I was born, according to most of my family.
I thought you were already born then.
Well, somewhere along there. But anyway, in 1861, the French Academy of Science put out a booklet that was a list of 51 scientific facts that disprove the Bible. Now, it's controversial because of this. The controversy is that now that booklet no longer exists. No big surprise there. In 1861, it was a scientific booklet, and so yeah, it's got a good shot of not existing. It don't exist any longer. Some argue that it never existed and said that therefore anything based against this is hogwash because it didn't exist. But I will tell you this. There is known reference to this booklet at least back to 1936 where a guy referenced this particular booklet. And there's numerous different ones. So there's a good chance that it did exist. Now, we don't know exactly what the 51 items were, but I can tell you one that was part of it. And here's what the idea was. The point was that in 1861, these French scientists got together and they took things that were scientific fact, a man's wisdom at that time, and said these 51 things are scientific fact, and they disproved the Bible. And it's that simple. Now, one of those things we do know about. Everybody knows what an atom is, right?
Yes.
We all know what an atom is?
No. It's a very small particle that you cannot see.
That's a good description. All right. Well, you know where that word...
Cease heard that because he said he didn't know what it was.
Oh, okay. Well, you know the word atom comes from the Greek word atomos. So it's about the same. Does anybody know what that Greek word means? No, it means...
Hello.
Nope, it's uncuttable. Uncuttable. It's defined basically as being the smallest possible particle of something. Why was it called that?
They thought the atom was a small thing.
That's exactly right. They thought that there could be nothing smaller than the atom. They had discovered the atom and it was the absolute smallest thing that could possibly be. Now, does anybody know what's the smallest known particle now?
It's either electrons.
There's something inside them. I can't remember what it's called.
It's electrons, neutrons, and protons. It's one of them.
There's something inside
Electron.
Okay.
There's something inside the electron.
All right. With it's actually something even smaller than the electrons, neutrons, and protons, which are actually what makes up an atom. So they're smaller than the atom. But we know of quarks, and if I'm not mistaken, there's actually something else now that's been determined to make up quarks. So, yeah, and I actually talked about this one time several months ago, how we continue, the more our knowledge or our technology grows, the more we find out that we don't know. Things get smaller and smaller, and stuff like that, things get bigger and bigger. We expand our knowledge on that, the things that as technology advances and stuff. All right, so right there was something that has been debunked. Well, let me tell you what the thing was. In 1936, the guy that wrote this one thing that we know for a fact exists. In 1936, he said all 51 items that was on that list from 1861 had been debunked or refuted and was no longer scientific fact. All 51 that they, in 1861, that they were using to say the Bible was wrong, turns out those things were all wrong. So, but just guess what didn't change? The Bible still hasn't changed. The Bible's still the same. It's not changed at all. So let's keep on moving. Let's keep on keeping on. We're going to start off with the first possible textbook. Pick this one because it's got some really good stuff, and I think a lot of you will kind of enjoy it. The first textbook would be astronomy. Who can give me the definition of astronomy? What it is?
Stars.
Study of stars or space or anything outside of the realm. Yeah. All right. What does the Earth hang on, sit on? How is the Earth?
The gravitational orbit.
But what's it sit on? What is it? What
Gravity.
holds it?
Gravity.
We're glad we ever be here. Now down here the horns blowing, so I know we.
Daddy just got started.
Amen.
Amen.
Get started and
All right. No, actually, the Earth hangs on nothing.
go with a prayer.
There's nothing holding up there. Well, here, let me give you a little idea, though, about how things have changed through our history, our world's history. The early Egyptian scientists, you know what they thought about the Earth? They thought it sat on 5 pillars. And there were 5 pillars. Y'all know what a pillar is? A column?
No.
A post? But there was these 5 posts, and the Earth sat on that. That's what they thought. But they didn't know. That was their scientific theory.
How is it possibly that big of a post?
Hold on, it's better. Anybody know who the giant was that supposedly held up the Earth?
Atlas.
And what was he?
He was the god.
That's good enough. He was a Greek little g god. So the Greeks believed that there was this giant god named Atlas that held up the Earth on his shoulders. And that's what held the Earth up.
That was before technology.
Hold on. If you was
that's not well
but if you was a Hindu, you thought that the Earth sat on the backs of elephants. And then when they realized, well, what are the elephants standing on? Well, the elephants were standing on a tortoise, a giant tortoise shell. And then somebody finally said, well, what is the tortoise on? Well, then they said, well, he's standing on, the tortoise is on the back of a humongous snake. And then finally somebody said, well, what's the snake on? And they said, well, he's in the giant cosmic sea, swimming. And that's what the Hindus' answer has been for what holds the Earth up. Now, as we said, what do we know holds up the Earth? Nothing. There is nothing, I mean, far as tangible, physical, there's nothing that holds it up. It's just there. It hangs on nothing. Yes, sir, real quick.
People say that heaven's in the clouds, but what about all the other ones?
Hold on a minute. We ain't got to that part yet. Hold that question. Anyway, let's get an answer real quick to this. All right, so science, man's science, finally theorized that the Earth actually hung on nothing, that it was suspended by itself. When do you think that happened?
God.
I'm going to say
1922.
In 1680, Sir Isaac Newton, y'all heard that name, right?
Yeah.
Gravity and all that kind of
Discovered
stuff.
gravity.
He was the first scientist to ever actually theorize that the Earth wasn't attached to anything. That was in the 1680s. Okay. When was it proven scientifically? When the Earth was hung on that?
1898, something like that.
Yes. Say that again.
When the fallen man landed on the moon.
No, it would be a little bit before that, but you're close.
The small Christians still think that nothing about the earth even
You're not answering the question, you Paul. Here we go, you're right. When man finally made it into space in the 1960s, they were able to prove scientifically that the earth hung on the moon.
It was like the first telescope.
Hold on, just hold on, don't get your
Well, I
head.
can say
So, this is just this is big scientific fact. Now, that's what we're going with, okay? So, it wasn't until the 1960s that science could prove that the earth hung on nothing. Now,
Then you prove it because you could just go around the earth and then you find.
well, you would have to actually cover the entire earth. So that could have happened, but I don't think anybody ever managed to do that either, especially considering how that
They thought
probably
the earth was
still
flat.
is not even
I think
possible.
it takes 7 days to actually make a full circle.
On what? You'd be going mighty fast, I can tell you that. Anyways, here we go. So, let's look at Job chapter 26, verse 7. Now, first, hold on, don't put it up. Take it back down real quick. It don't matter, but good job. Job. Job is actually the oldest book in the Bible, as far as the time that it describes. Well, no, I'm talking about, no, I ain't talking about that way. I'm talking about the book itself. The story would have been the oldest written book alive. Now, some theorize that Moses wrote it when he wrote the Pentateuch, but it is the book that would be the oldest book in the Bible. Job is believed to have lived during the time of the post-flood patriarchs, which would have put him in the life of Noah to Abraham in that period. He lived somewhere along in their lifespans. All right, so that puts that book to be probably around 3,500 years old. All right, now throw it back up there, David. Thank you. Job 26:7 tells us that he is God, stretched out the north over the empty place and hangeth the earth upon nothing. So science has worked in all this time to determine what holds the earth up when the Bible has always told us what holds the earth up.
Nothing.
And so, but the point is that there is astronomy scientific fact number one that took till the 1960s for man to prove, and all they had to do was trust what the Bible said, because the Bible told us that already. Now,
I told you that.
how do you think Job knew that?
Because God told him.
And that's what the Bible tells us. It says that men of God were given direction by God, and that's how they know things. That's a
So when was like the Bible thing?
boy.
What?
Hold on. Hey, say questions that's not exactly what we're saying.
No, I know. I'm talking. It's like gonna lead up to that.
Yeah, well, no, this was not. That was about a month ago when we was doing apologetics on creationism and the Bible.
Well, I see what you're saying.
But I do see what you're saying.
Like it's kind of proof because
Hold on.
don't do that.
Right. So stay with me and then ask that question. All right. Now that was the earth hanging on nothing. Next theory we're going to talk about is what shape is the earth?
Circle.
Fear.
Sphere. Okay. Have we always thought that?
No.
Yes.
Scientifically, has that always been
No.
the theory? Does everybody in here believe that the earth is round? If you, well, let me check that. If you don't think the earth is round, raise your hand. The truth is there are flat earthers still today. There really are. Huh?
Hey, he's
What'd
not
you say?
the smartest
I
science
said,
club.
I was saying I have a client that believes in
There are people that still believe in
How
flat
do we all
earth.
know?
He can answer some questions.
All right, anyway. All right, so let's keep moving forward. The earth is round. If you run and you find whatever the movies always call the ends of the earth, you will not fall off right there. You'll just keep on going around and end up coming back where
Unless
you
you fall
were.
off the mountain.
My client believes you fall off at Antarctica.
In Antarctica, yeah, I mean, people, there are flat, y'all, there's flat
He
earth.
truly 100% believes that.
There are truly people that believe that. Now, when did science and who, the bonus question is who, when did science and who was the scientist that first theorized around Earth? Yes.
Fred is something Magellan. And it
No,
was
hold on what you got there? Because that's not who theorized it first. Anybody else?
Albert Einstein.
I got a feeling that y'all gonna miss this one. Let's just go, let me answer this one. It was first theorized in 200 BC. Hold on, y'all listen. 200 BC by, not even close,
Christopher Columbus.
Eratosthenes. He was at one time the head of the Alexandrian Library, which was considered the brain center of the world for thought. So that's who first theorized it, 200 BC. So it's a little bit, they figured out the round earth, or at least they thought they had. This is a scientific theory. Remember, we're going off the scientific man theory stuff right now. When was it actually proven scientific?
It was whenever that one guy circled the earth.
What did you say his name was?
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Ferdinand Magellan. Now, actually, a lot of people credit Columbus when he sailed to where we're at now in 1492, but he didn't go all the way around. A few years later, Ferdinand Magellan actually circumnavigated the globe.
He was from Spain,
Took him 3 years to go around it.
and he lost his
He actually died in the process, but one of his ships did make the trip all the way around. And that proved the scientific fact that the earth is indeed round. Now, once again, maybe they should have just been reading their Bible. Give us Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. Isaiah wrote, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth." That word circle is also defined as sphere. What the earth actually is. All right, and then it goes on to talk about all those little grasshoppers that inhabit it. God is just, he's the ruler of it. He decides what it does. But the point is that Isaiah, which was written, do you know when Isaiah was written? Anybody?
200 BC.
About 750 BC. That's when Isaiah wrote. So we know without doubt by the Bible that God gave it to Isaiah that the earth was indeed round as early as 750 BC, which would have been over 500 years before the first theory of man's science brought it out. So, and then it was another, it's another 1700 years before they was in the proof. So anyway, it's about 1500 when Magellan was what, 1503 or something like that? Yeah. So anyway, there we go. We're going to do one more in astronomy. Number of stars.
Uncountable.
What's the Bible say?
Ain't it like infinity?
Okay.
Well, ain't it like
Abraham counted them.
something to sand? Something.
Man, see, y'all thinking a little bit. But here, let's go through a list real quick. The first time that the number or the stars were given a number by the field of science, man's science, was by Hipparchus in 150 BC. He said there was 1,022 stars.
What? No, that's just what he could see.
Hold on. How many stars do you think you can see on a clear night at your house with?
Like
With your naked eye?
I would
about
love
100 something.
You can see about 1,022. That's why he come up with that number. Now, about 200 years later or so, somewhere along in there, Ptolemy, around 140 AD, he said, no, Hipparchus was wrong. There's 1,026 stars in the sky. Well, then comes along another scientist that had something that helped him out with looking at the stars. Anybody know who that is?
Telescope.
Telescope, but who was it?
It was some big philosopher.
There was a scientist named Galileo.
Yeah, dude.
You know when he built this telescope?
1465.
In 1609. So in the year 1609, he built a telescope. He didn't invent the telescope. It had been invented a few years earlier. He was the first one to build one to look at stars with. What he found out was that with his little telescope that he built in 1609, he could see millions and millions of stars. So now it just went from people thinking there was a little over 1,000 stars in the sky to people thinking there's millions and millions of stars in the sky. Well, then there's another telescope that come along. Anybody know what that one's called?
It's the Hubble
Hubble.
telescope.
Well, at around 2008, the Hubble, based on work it had been doing since its inception, it decided that there was at least 2 trillion observable galaxies. And then science had to estimate, well, how many stars does that mean? Well, they came up with this idea. This is now. This would be 2017, actually. This is the latest stuff I can find. In 2017, a team of scientists come up with the idea that there's actually around 10 trillion galaxies, and that it would put the star count at somewhere around 1 septillion. And for anybody wondering what that is a 1 and 24 zeros written after that one. That's way more than a million.
So doesn't that
That's what
look
X
like
marks.
real?
Do what?
That's what X marks.
Yes, absolutely. I can't even begin to start the example. I did anyway. All right, so that means that science, man, has come up with the idea that there was at least 1 septillion stars
I thought
as of 2017. Well, hold on. The leading scientist of that group that did this study and this work, a guy named Cornwright, he said that we're actually underestimating. Again, that was in 2017. That was 4 years ago. I don't even know. I couldn't find any more recent research or data on that. So, here's something I got to tell them. They put a lot of work in this, have they not? To determine the count of the stars. Well, guess what? Jeremiah 33:22 had something to say about the stars. It says, as the host of heaven, and in this case that means the stars in the heavenly skies, cannot be numbered, neither the sand of the sea measured. Just like you was talking about the sands. So will I multiply the seed of David, my servant, and the Levites and minister unto me. So right there, Jeremiah let it be known to everybody, you can't count the stars. They're innumerable. There's no way of being able to count. God let him know. There is no way to count. 1 septillion is not even enough. And that's the biggest number I know. And I only know that because I found it on the internet.
Ain't there a place that saws a big gas area?
They're wherever God makes them. So that'd be my guess. So let's move along. I want to try to get through this as quick as I can. Next textbook we're going to look at would be a biology textbook. What's biology? Study of life. Absolutely. That is exactly right. Study of life. First off, I'd like to read to you Psalms 139:14, which says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That's what David said. It's what he's trying to say. That's like us trying to describe something we can't describe. He's like, I can't even understand what you've done here to make me a human being. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. It's unfathomable. And guess what? As advanced as we are scientifically, technologically, and medically, we still practice medicine. Why? Because we don't have the answers. We don't know. Just like the coronavirus. This body is man cannot understand the amazing thing that God has made. But let's look a little bit more into that. All right. What is probably the most important system in the body for life?
What? In the what?
Circulatory. That was the word I was looking for. And you're right. The heart's part of that. The blood. All right. That's without a doubt. Blood. The circulatory system is the most important. Probably the most important system of the human body to keep it alive. You know when the circulatory system was actually discovered?
1,000 years ago.
In 1615.
Oh,
Not even 1,000 years ago. Folks, about 400 or 500 years ago. So that means that up until then, and that again was theorized. So even in 1615, they thought blood just sat in the body. It was just part of the body. That's what science believed. What was that? Does anybody know what? It was a common way of treating people that were sick and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. Anybody know what it was called?
No,
But that actually was what it was. Bloodletting. They used leeches sometimes to do it. It's called bloodletting. They would bleed you to get the bad out of you so you get better. Now, in some ways it helped on occasion because of certain little things, but for the most part, no. Because why? I ain't talking about the leeches, but why is it bad to bleed?
Does it bleed out?
Yeah, you don't got so much blood. You won't bleed out. What happens if you don't have any blood? He'll die. Because why?
Yeah.
It's the life of us. Do you think that William Harvey back in 1615 was the first one to figure that out?
No.
Think the Bible might can tell us something about it?
When the soldier got stabbed.
How early do you think the Bible can tell us about it?
200 BC.
Leviticus 17:14, I believe it was. Yes, this would have been even before what you just said. For it is the life of all flesh. The blood of it is for the life thereof. He's setting it be known that blood is the life. Blood is what makes us alive and live. We have to have it. It's there. And it goes on to talk about why we shouldn't eat blood. As Christians, as humans, we should not take blood and eat it. That's why. And now somebody says, you eat a medium rare or a rare steak. That's not what it's saying. It's talking about the blood. While it's living, or the blood itself. You don't do that. That's wrong. It's against, because the blood is life. We don't eat life. That's what the Bible put it up as. But that would have put it 3,000 years before science started proving some of this stuff. The Bible told us that the blood is life. So another time here that the Bible has been given is telling us the truth. It's describing life for us. Quarantine. How many of you ever heard of quarantine before coronavirus? Before coronavirus, how many of you ever heard about quarantine and knew what it meant? Before. Okay, what you got?
I saw our TV show.
Okay, what you got? Movies? Yep. Same? Yep, okay. All right, so, yep. All right. So, but we kind of had an idea of kind of what it means, but we just thought of it more as a movie problem. Well, do you know what, any of y'all ever heard of the Black Plague?
Yes.
Y'all remember, y'all learned about it?
Didn't kill like
60 million people estimated to have died back in the Dark Ages to the Black Plague.
Back then, that was like 1/3 of the
Yeah,
population.
that's
Coach
just
Mom
true, that's
taught us
right.
about
That
that.
was 1/3 of the population.
No, it was probably more than a third. I don't even remember what, it was like half the population of the world that died estimated.
2/3.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, yeah, of people that died. Do you know what ended the Black Plague?
Oh,
Well, yes, but what?
quarantine.
Quarantine. Now, do you think the doctors put that in place?
No.
No?
No.
Who did it?
I feel like the people did.
The church. The church brought around the idea of medicine at that time. And here's one thing I want you to try to understand. Never think that we're smarter than the people of the distant past. We're not smarter. As a matter of fact, more than likely we're dumb because we have too much convenience now. These people have always been intelligent and been able to figure things out. We just have more technology, and that is combined intelligence through time is why we are advanced in those kind of ways. Like I said, we're dumber on how to survive. But medicine at that time they didn't get this concept of how things were passed around and everything. But guess what? Leviticus 13:46 said, all the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be. So see, all the way back when the children of Israel were coming, they were in the wilderness, they just left Egypt, and God's telling Moses, hey, you tell them, if somebody's sick, bad sick, you keep them separated. You quarantine. So it was stuff that's being told to us. The Bible told us this all the way back over 3,000 years ago. What about, let's look at this. What about hand washing and its correlation to spreading germs, that we should wash our hands? When do you think science brought that about? When do you think science
After
put
chickenpox.
about when in time do you think they figured out that it was a good idea to wash your hands before you went to work on the next person?
600.
It was never put into place
So you had to
until
19
1847 by Dr. Semmelweis. He was the very first person to ever figure out. He would deliver babies. And back then there was something they called what they call it? Basically it was baby death. They had a name for it. Baby fever or something like that. But they would go from one, it actually had come from the morgue where they've been dissecting and trying to figure out and learn. They go deliver this baby, and then they deliver the next baby, and they deliver the next baby. And all of a sudden, 2 of those 3 women died. and it was pretty common. They'd say it was an outbreak of this baby fever of death, whatever it was, birth fever, I can't remember. He finally goes, you know what? We're going to wash our hands when we leave the morgue before we go. And he actually used a concoction of stuff that he said you could not go in to deliver a baby until you couldn't smell the death on your hands from that autopsy you just did. You know what? All of a sudden, these numbers of women dying hit rock bottom. They realized that there was a connection. But then, they would still occasionally have outbreaks of them dying. And he goes, okay, we're going to go further. We're going to change our clothes and take a bath after we leave the morgue and go in and take care of the baby. And then all of a sudden, this number's not responsible. And he realized that the germs, or whatever you want to call it, from that death and that bad decay and those kind of things was what was actually causing the death of other people. He figured that out. So in 1847, he implemented this stuff. 1847 took that long. Sanitation is important. We know that. What have we been doing? What have y'all learned about during this coronavirus? Wash your hands, use Germ-X, do these things. Why? You know, so you don't put the coronavirus, right, exactly, so you don't get it yourself, so you don't put it on you and get the coronavirus. Numbers 19:14, we're going to read 14 through 16 in verse 19. This is the law. When a man dieth in a tent, all that come into the tent and all that is in the tent shall be unclean 7 days. Unclean means that he has to be separated, quarantined. And every open vessel within that tent or around that person which hath no covering bound upon it, it's unclean. Throw it out. And whosoever toucheth one that is slain with a sword in the open fields, or a dead body, or a bone of a man, or a grave, shall be unclean 7 days. He's quarantined 7 days. Verse 19 says, and the clean person shall sprinkle upon the unclean on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day, and on the 7th day. And on the 7th day he shall purify himself, and wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and then he shall be clean that evening. So they realized God gave it to the children of Israel. That when you come around sickness and dying and death and those things, it's unclean. Go clean yourself up and separate yourself from people until that uncleanness can die out, until the germs can die out and they won't be on you anymore. That was given to us right way back at the beginning of the time. It took us to 1847 to put it in place. Because instead of trusting the Bible, we trusted the wisdom of man. What about history? We're about to run through this. History won't take very long. You think history, and as history, I think, was one of the first things that came up. First off, archaeologists, the ones that don't believe in God and the Bible, they usually try to, they're doing digs and work in order to prove the Bible wrong. How many times has archaeology proved the Bible wrong? Anybody know? Dalton, you ready? Oh, no. How many times, but we're talking about the actual final findings, how many times has archaeology proved the Bible wrong?
Everything they made up and they thought was true.
Never. There's never been an actual archaeological find that has proved the Bible wrong. As a matter of fact, every archaeological find instead proves the Bible correct if it has anything that goes that the Bible talks about. It always proves it correct.
Well, they believe in carbon 14 dating, isn't that what it's called?
Again, we're not talking, that's all theory stuff. That's all stuff that's assumptions. Right now, we're talking about actual findings.
But like what Nicholas Dalton was saying.
That's right, I know what Dalton's saying, and you're absolutely right, Dalton. That, well, they make theories based off of small parts of finds. Let me define what you're talking about. Okay, they find this one thing. And I'll give you a good example because it goes into the example we're fixing to use. But for years, historians and critics of the Bible said that the Bible obviously was wrong because the Babylonian records that historians and archaeologists had showed that Belshazzar, or did not name Belshazzar as the last king of Babylon. The Bible tells us Belshazzar was the last king of Babylon. So all the stuff they had found pointed to, what was his name? Let me look right here. Nabonidus was the last king, all right, by the records that archaeologists have. Guess what? In 1854, the cylinders of Nabonidus were dug up by the archaeologists. 4 cylinders that was written on and gave all kinds of information and history about the end of the Babylonian Empire, Nabonidus, and guess what it found out? It showed that actually Nabonidus was the father of Belshazzar, and him and Belshazzar were actually co-regents or co-kings. Nabonidus choosing to travel and do things all throughout the known world with Belshazzar as the active king within the city. So we find out through archaeology that had been where they had been said, see, that proves it's wrong. When they actually found the rest of the stuff, it proved once again the Bible's correct. But then you say, but it don't say that, it just says Belshazzar. Let me read something to you real quick. And I'm jumping ahead right here, David, so just look down. Go to Daniel 5:16. And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretation. This is Belshazzar talking to Daniel. And dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing, and if y'all are familiar, remember the flaming hand that appeared and wrote something on the wall? That's what we're talking about. It says, and if you can read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck. And I want you to listen to this part. And shalt be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. Why would he have named him the 3rd ruler in the kingdom? Because there was already 2 kings, which the cylinders of Nabonidus pointed out as well. Again, it's not only showing that Belshazzar was in fact the last king, but pointing out that he was a co-king, that there was 2 kings already. And now Daniel had he not lost, had not been beaten by Cyrus the Great, that some say that very night, the next day, something like that, then Daniel would have been king number 3 in the nation of Babylon. Now, like I said, I jumped ahead a little bit. I want to just go back for just 1 second, guys, and tell you this. A lot of the critics say that Moses couldn't have wrote the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, because at the time it was supposed to have been written, writing had not been invented yet. They couldn't write. Nobody could read and write. And then, once again, archaeology digs up the Tel El Amarna tablets. And guess what they find? Oh, Lord, these things were written way before Moses was even supposed to live. And it's talking about all kinds of things, about trade routes and stuff like that between these kingdoms that we know exist from the Bible. But, yeah, that, here's another thing. Genesis 4, verses 20 through 22. And go back to 20. Yep. And Ada bare Jabal, and he was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. So we had the folks that run cows, ranchers right there. This is describing the people that came off of Cain in Genesis. Cain killed Abel, and then he went off on his own with his wife, and then he started having kids. All right, so he did that. Go to verse 21. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handled the harp and organ. So we got artists and musicians, people that can play. What do they usually do if they can play? Well, they're reading sheet music, right? And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was named. All right, it says right there that he was the instructor. So he taught people how to work, probably not just iron and brass, the metals, probably construction of all sorts. Wood, making brick, all of this stuff. Now, you're going to tell me that people are this far advanced and know this much, but can't read and write. Can't figure out that they can make life a lot easier by just developing an alphabet and writing out the words and passing things around so people can learn. I'm sorry, if they can do all of that, they've already got it right. As a matter of fact, I'm a firm believer that Moses had not only godly inspiration to write the Pentateuch, but he also had historical records that would have been brought along from Noah, because they had already written. There's been too many things that were still in place. So we do know that historically they could do all of this stuff. Now, I'm gonna wrap it up, so y'all don't get too tired on it. The fight to take this Bible away out of our lives, it's a war. Don't ever doubt it. It is a war. Primarily, it's a war that's fought in the unseen world, but it's done through people. It's a war to remove Jesus from our lives, because if we remove Jesus, and we take Jesus off of it, and then the Bible away from it, and we just have our own moral code, that moral code has no basis, and eventually we have no moral code. Kind of like what some people we see. They've been trying to disprove the accuracy of the Bible forever now. Well, very hard for, well, most of the time. But it always ends up, the funny thing is that as they try to disprove the Bible, all they ever do is prove the accuracy of the Bible. The Bible continues to be valid without it. Never changes. Now, evil will never rest, and it's never going to rest because it wants to make this world better. For what? Make it better. So you got a better world to leave and go to hell. Because when they take the Bible out of it, that's what happens. We lose God, we lose our knowledge and understanding of Jesus, and we lose our actual way, even though. No, we'll always be able to come up with theories. I can promise that. Now, I want to ask you this. Last little question before we wrap it up. Yes, Will?
Like, it's kind of off topic, but you know Helen Keller?
Sure do.
How did she go to heaven? Did she go to heaven because she was blind and as a human?
Actually, I can't tell you. I don't know if she went to heaven. I think she probably did because she professed to be a Christian. And she was a very intelligent woman that did learn how to read and write and communicate through other means and other ways.
She was way smarter than any of us.
She probably was way smarter than any of us. But now let me ask you something. The book that we've just been discussing, that's very accurate, obviously, with the most, what we can consider the most simple things. What does it do to you when you hold it in your hand? I mean, really, I'm not looking for some textbook answer. I'm asking you the question: what does it do for you individually when you pick the Bible?
It makes you feel good.
Does it make you feel good? Confident?
It makes you feel safe.
Does it feel safe? I mean, this is for anybody. What does it do?
I get a little excited about the reading mornings.
I don't know about y'all, but I realize that when I'm holding this, it's as though I'm standing and talking with Jesus. Why? We've discussed this a bunch of times. Because this is the Word. And it is honest to goodness when I read these words, it is reading, it's hearing Jesus. I don't have to have any of this stuff I've talked to y'all about tonight to prove to me that this is real, that this is the truth. But we do use this kind of stuff to help other people to see it, and maybe hopefully direct them to read a little bit more and study it a little bit more and get a little more acquainted with it so that when they pick it up, it makes them feel too. I won't lie to you. I can tell you, when I was sick with coronavirus, I got pretty sick at one point of it. And I got so sick I couldn't read. I couldn't even watch TV and really get what I was getting. But I could pick my Bible up and I could sit in the bed with it. And I just felt better. I was confident. It can do that for every one of you. You got to let it. You don't even have to know how to read it, buddy. You just hold on. Because guess what? One day you will know how to read, and it'll get real good to you. But if you can't read, just hold on to it, because it'll make you feel better. Know that when you're holding this, Jesus is holding you. And that's a pretty confident thing. All right. Does anybody got any questions or any comments or any thoughts or any ideas? Anybody? And don't act like you don't. I know y'all do. Y'all been throwing your hands up the whole time. You already got yours out? Yes, ma'am.
Has anybody made those things that, like those pictures that you would hang up?
That's posted at Women's Church.
Thank you very much. Did anybody?
I was
All right, so we still don't got any posters or flyers. You know what? I think I'm gonna, this time, I'm gonna about halfway through the week, I'm gonna put a reminder out. Parents, if y'all would, pass those reminders on to your children.
Don't do it, I got it.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have nothing to make it up.
That's the Hindus. If you're a Christian, then you had all of the New Testament, or all the Old Testament always. Even the first Christians had the Old Testament. Everything we answered tonight, we answered out of the Old Testament. I don't know if y'all noticed that. All of these answers that we were given come from the Old Testament, meaning that as a Christian, because you couldn't be a Christian until after Jesus ascended. Prior to that, you had to understand that you were not good enough, because the law proved that every day to you, but you still had to love God in your heart. And those people as well had the Old Testament teaching these things. So if you are a person of God, let's put it that way, because that envelops more than just Christians, then you know these things. Psalms 19 talks about the fact that the heavens and the creation shows us all of these things. All we have to do is look and believe. It's all there. So, yeah, Christians, people of God, they would know these things, even as far back, because God gives us those things. Yes, sir.
When the people thought the earth was flat, they meant you put it on the lifetime change too. Because if the sun came up and it was flat, it'd come up, and once it was over, it would fly up the whole.
I do like what you're saying, but the way you said it is pretty good to me, because, I don't think that, what was his name, Eratosthenes? I don't think he had a Timex, so he didn't know that time had changed because of the timeline.
But couldn't he kill every day?
Do you want to know how he come up with his theory? And that's why I'm trying to get across to y'all that, a lot of people already thought the Earth was round. But science didn't prove it. Science of man didn't prove it. He actually proved it by something like you're talking about. Read about it. As a matter of fact, I will give you his name. Look it up and see what he done. It had to do with shadows in different places at the same time on the Earth, and that's how he scientifically discovered the roundness of the Earth. So you're on the exact right thought about it. But I will write that name down. I'll let you look him up and read about his research. It's pretty interesting. Yes.
This is like teaching when I was little, but he believes that evolution applies.
Yeah, and there are people that believe that, but sadly that can't be. It's a delusion. It's the way Satan works. Is what we've been talking about all along. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Any other comments? Anybody that has to do with this instead of the private conversation going on that third row from the back there? Yeah, I was talking to you. I'm gonna start being like Mike Parker. None of y'all remember him except for maybe a couple. He'd point you out. So, but anyway.
So should I send my client the text of the part of the Bible that says the earth is round?
You can, and I will tell you, if she's basing her flat earth off of a Christian standpoint,
Yes.
they have some verses that they'll point back to you, but none of them are quite as clear as
I
that.
saw this one.
verse
she's a
says
Christian.
that.
She lives in God.
They have to theorize based on certain writings that it's flat, where we actually have it tell us that it's.
She's a rabbit hole chaser. She chases every rabbit hole she finds.
That happens. All right, anybody else? Anything? Anybody? All right, let's take some prayer requests. Hey, first off, I want to ask, does anybody remember who we are praying for? Huh? Shaku. Good job. How many of you, and now don't lie because we all fail, it's no big deal. How many actually prayed for you? I'm glad to see it. Hey, if you if you didn't, try to use this time to remember to pray for them. Y'all, prayer makes an honest difference in people. All right, go ahead. Yep. That's me. Okay. All right. Anybody? Yep. Go ahead, Camber. Then Eric.
The government.
Amen.
America.
Amen.
Oh, and
Absolutely. Anybody else? Yeah. Anything new? Anybody else? Yeah. There's been a little bit of improvement, right? A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we got a cousin from up in Tennessee, her and her husband has lived a pretty rough life, drug addiction, that kind of stuff. As far as I know, never really made any effort to come away from it. They don't have either one of their kids. I don't think they have any other, just the two. That's Braylon and I can't remember the other. Braylon and Braylon, but they don't. They finally, I think, have reached a point that they realize they need help, and they are going to some Christian-based rehab up in Ohio. It's supposed to be about a 13-month program. Y'all would pray for them that they stay there and they get help. And I can tell you right now, the addictions are not overcome long-term anyway, except for through the Lord Jesus Christ. He takes it away from you. So y'all pray that they'll come to know Jesus, and that way they'll come away from addiction. All right. Anybody else? Alden? I don't know if anybody knows him, but it was Teresa. What was her name? Sherry Holmes. I don't know who all remembers Sherry Holmes. She was about my age, maybe a year or two older. Her daughter, who is grown. Okay, so she's about grown. She's been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So y'all remember her. It's cancer.
What kind?
Hodgkin's lymphoma, that's all I know.
Where's it at?
Again, that's all I know. If I'm not mistaken, Hodgkin's, is it Hodgkin's lymphoma means it's outside of the lung area, and if it's not Hodgkin's, it means it's within the lung area. I think is what the way that works. I could be wrong.
Isn't Hodgkin's something to do with like your blood, because that's how they.
Well, it's got stuff to do
It's
with
like
blood,
your
but what
cancer.
most cancers do. But I know non and Hodgkin's has something to do with the chest area or lung area.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, anybody else? You got any more? Yes, sir.
Melissa, she's got an appointment with a neurosurgeon on Monday.
Okay. Maybe some good news.
And the congregation are agreeing.
Okay.
They, some of them is sick.
All right. So, let's hold them up.
They've tested, and all of them's elderly, so
I know that.
that's it.
Let's keep them under prayers for sure, y'all. I'd agree. It's near and dear to most of us. So,
Katie Hayes, hers are both, her parents both have been deployed, and they have two small children.
yeah, that's tough there. They're both National Guard. They've both been deployed to South Florida, I believe, and with no, I don't think they've got any end game, end date as of right now. And their kids, I think, are staying with Vicky Lynn. Y'all remember them, and remember Vicky Lynn. I mean, it's tough to be that age and taking care of kids. So. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? All right. There is I do remember, I was asked today about praying for a man named, I believe it was James Adams. He's, I think from up around the Paxton area,
Oh, I
maybe.
know James, he was Kaylin to me, I called him.
80 years old? No, this is an 80-year-old.
Okay.
Okay, all right, go
I
ahead.
know, I called him.
Maybe the same-
He goes
maybe
by
it's-
James.
okay.
I bet it's his grandfather.
Very possible, yeah. Mr. Adams has COVID, and they called family in. He's not doing well, he's in the hospital, and he don't feel like he's gonna make it. But, the guy I talked with is a good friend of his, younger guy, but you're a good friend with him, and as he said, don't pray. I know miracles happen every day, and I'd love to have him stay around. So y'all remember that thing? Like I said, I believe it's James Adams, and I know it's up in the factory. flu, so you're right, it's probably bad. All right, anybody else? Anybody want to pray for us tonight? Willard, you got it? Go right ahead, y'all, bow our heads.